From Apeldoorn, we were transported to Stalag 11B at Fallingbostel, near Hanover, by train. Several prisoners escaped on this journey. We stayed there only a few days, while they arranged for warrant officers and sergeants to be sent to different camps for lower ranks. While there, we were shocked to see Russians in the next compound eating grass. Every one of us picked up fleas and itched all over. Our next move was by railway cattle trucks. To make sure we didn't attempt to escape, we had to remove our boots and braces. We were locked in these trucks for 4 days, with only a bucket in the corner for toilet facilities. There were too many in a truck for us all to lie down at the same time. I had an advantage because I was tall and could get a breath of fresh air through the grill high in the corner. The stench was dreadful because some men had dysentery. There were long delays because the RAF had bombed the railway lines. We eventually arrived at Stalag 8C, Saaken, next door to Stalag Luft 3, the famous wooden horse camp. Upper Silesia is very cold in winter, and I only had half a blanket apart from the clothes I was wearing when captured. Rations were small in 11B, but even smaller in 8C. Each hut had a warrant officer in charge. This warrant officer had a register of all men in the hut, and each name had a number. About 12 noon, our first meal of the day arrived. It was skilly, watery soup, in a wooden barrel with 2 holes near the top so that a pole could be slotted through for 2 men to carry it. We each had a tin on a string into which the warrant officer ladled a tin full of soup when your number was called. The numbers were always in numerical order, so that if there was still soup left after everyone had helping, the warrant officer would continue serving until it was all gone. Next day, he would start where he'd left off the day before, hence some days you got 2 helpings. About 5 p.m. we got a bread ration, a small loaf with a date stamped on the side, months old. This had to be shared between 8 men. The loaf was cut up with an army jackknife. The ceremony of cutting the playing cards would begin. The man cutting the highest card would have first pick of the pieces of bread, and so on. We were so hungry that a few crumbs more were important. We did get a pat of margarine with it, then nothing more until 12 noon the next day. During our stay at Stalag 8C, we did once get a Red Cross parcel, which had to be divided between 16. These parcels were beautifully packed and the contents well planned. In camps where prisoners received 1 per week to supplement their menu, they fared very well. A certain warrant officer stole chocolate from a parcel and was thrown into the toilet pit. The latrine was outside, a large square pit with posts surrounding it, supporting a pole at sitting height. No toilet paper, no privacy. Apart from the hunger, the boredom was demoralizing. We had 1 book in our hut, The Robe, which became very dog-eared after being passed round so many. There were a few packs of playing cards, which men happened to have in their pockets. No sporting equipment was provided, not even a ball to kick around. We talked, but what did you have to talk about? You can guess what we were going to eat when at last we got out of this hellhole. Every night after 9 p.m, when the sentries were outside the compound, 2 fellows dodged the searchlights and came to each hut and read us the BBC News. The Germans knew someone had a radio in the camp and therefore frequently ordered everyone out of the huts to make searches for it. They never found it, because always the next night we had the news. This was a great boost to our morale because we knew the Russians were advancing and getting nearer to the camp, which was why on the 8th of February we were ordered out of our huts and all those fit enough to walk were marched out of the camp. After walking 20 kilometres in the snow, we were herded into a brickyard for the night, marched off the next morning, and the next night we spent in a wood. The next 3 nights we huddled together on football pitches. Still in the open, still in the snow. It is not surprising that several died of exposure, so after that we spent nights in barns. Now we had no BBC News and no idea where we were going. Each day we struggled to put one foot in front of the other. This went on for 31 days until we reached Stalag 9B at Bad Orb near Frankfurt on Main, having marched about 375 miles. I'm told about 50 died on this march, called the Death March. Men, too weak to carry on, just collapsed and were left, or clubbed and left. Sergeant Prince, we called him Curly, and I met at Appledorn and were together at 8C. On the long march, we supported each other through the bad patches, when there seemed no end to the misery. We were so cold and weak, but we seemed to give each other strength to carry on to the end of the journey on the 10th of March. After about 2 weeks, we heard gunfire and knew that the battlefront was getting near. On April the 2nd, Patton's tanks came through the wire. Our guards had all disappeared during the night. The Americans gave us donuts. They tasted delicious. One of the tank commanders threw tins of meat. 2 of the fellows ate the meat ravenously and died that night. After months of starvation, their bodies couldn't take it. How sad to be killed by intended kindness. We were then taken to an American base, where we were weighed. I weighed 7 stone, all 6 foot 3 inches of me, stripped and sprayed with DDT to kill the body lice, and given new clothing. Lovely to feel fresh and clean after 7 months with very few showers and no change of clothing. I was kept there for 9 days and then flown back to England and straight to hospital in Amersham on the 11th of April. Sadly, my father died on the same day. For many years, that was the 7 months of my life I did not want to remember. Now it is so far in the past that I feel the urge to record it for my grandchildren and great-grandchildren.